Okay, so here is a short video to give us a run through of a few photos I've edited so far to get an idea of the feel, and then I'm just going to run through the processes that I went through to get there. So first photo of Mum. This is another one that's been edited, and then we've got some high contrast black and white images. Just run through those again and show you the before and after shots so you can get an idea of what they were before. You can see the idea is that we're highlighting some of the lighter areas, popping the colour out a bit, giving a bit more detail to the image, giving it a bit of a vignette, darker around the edges so that the centre of the picture stands out. And this one I really wanted to lift the colour of these strawberries, get a bit more light into the glasses. This one just really wanted to have a nice dark feel to it, but then really pop out the highlights on the front of the shoe. And I thought this was a nice contrasty face which would go well with black and white. There's some nice shadows in there, you've got some really dark hair, then you've got some really light areas around the face and the eyes. You've got the dark face there, which I've obviously made a little bit darker, just using a vignette again. And then there's two photos that I'm going to attempt to edit. This one I'm just going to try and get some colour into it, brighten it up a bit. This one I'm going to attempt to do a high contrast black and white. So I generally try and get the light balance somewhere close to where I want it. Don't worry too much about that because you'll generally come back to it. Then I like to start at the bottom. So dehaze will just give it a bit more detail without focusing too much on the lines on the face. And then a vignette, if you put a vignette all the way in, obviously it does that, but just try and find a nice balance so you're just taking the focus away from the edge of the photos into the middle. Probably crop that a bit actually, bring that down a bit, and give it a bit of a rotation, get them in the middle. There we go. And that vignette is looking good. Then lens correction is always a good idea. Doesn't always make a big change, but it might just remove some barrel distortion. It tells you what lens you were using at the time. And then up to sharpening. So with sharpening, pick an area, so hit this little target, pick an area that you want to focus on. So an eye is always a pretty good place, and lift that sharpening up a bit. Now I generally find to get a nice sharp image you need to be coming in round about the 60-70 mark, something like that, and that's just going to bring the detail of the image in a little bit more. What you can do, it's a little bit noisy, not too much, you can just put a bit of noise reduction on there, just softens it up a little bit. Don't want to put too much on there, you end up with a really soft image. There we go. And then, so let's have another look at the light. Probably do a lift in these whites up a bit, but I don't want the faces to be too bright, so that'll do that. Get some nice, there you go, it's got some really nice light in there now. You can see the colours are starting to pop out. Sometimes there might be a little bit too much, so you can just drop the vibrance a little bit. You can lift the saturation. Try and get a natural skin tone. And clarity. Just watch how far you go on this, because it will start to do strange things to faces. There we go. Now, just with me lifting that light, the vignette seems to have disappeared a little bit. So it's quite a heavy vignette, this. But you can sometimes find if you go too far you start to see the shape. So you can then just change the... I'm going to feather it a bit more, so it's only getting the very edges. Just try and put a little bit more of that on there. Play around with contrast and you get something you're happy with. So what I'm doing there is raising the exposure but then dropping the whites, and that's balancing these faces a little bit because we've got quite a light background there. And there we go, I'm pretty happy with that. So just do a comparison. You've got your original one there. Now you can see the lines are a lot crisper in this one. You've got much better light, much more detail around the faces, and you've got a better contrast as well because they're a bit dark against this door here, so we've lifted the light of the faces. Okay, so next one is Bridesmaids in the Mirror, a personal favourite of mine. So for this, a good way to start, go to In Develop, where you'll be anywhere, go to the left hand side here, you can see there's some black and white filters. Now, depending on the kind of photo, will depend on which one's going to work best. And don't be surprised if when you first click it, it goes all horribly wrong. But then it's just a case of playing with it. So with a high contrast black and white, what I want to try and achieve here is get a really white backdrop. So it's going to feel like overkill at first, until we start to put some details into it. So you can see this has washed out all the back wall there now. Went down the bottom again. Dehaze is going to start to bring some of that back in. And then a vignette. Might make it a bit bigger. So get those edges really dark. But then what I want to do is just feather it out. It's probably a little bit too much. And just change the shape of it a little bit. There we go. Doesn't always have a good effect doing that. So sharpening again, I'm going to lift that right up. I'm going to just put that somewhere on our face. Now this is now quite a noisy image. Might be down to some grain actually, no. So you can add a bit of grain to it, with it being a black and white, just gives it that old effect. You might want to just reduce that and soften it a little bit. So because I've selected one of these presets over here, it's already started to populate and change some of these bits. I'm just thinking I need to get a little bit more light on the highlights so we can see the face a bit better there. Now the whites have gone quite high there, so I'll drop those a bit. And there we go. Something like that. Enjoy.